He left the safe wide open. Not by accident. Not because he forgot. But because he was testing her. Inside that vault, under soft LED lights and brushed steel walls, sat over $4 million in unmarked cash. Neatly stacked, banded by banks. Surrounded by Rolex watches, diamond rings, antique passports, and a pair of ruby cufflinks once worn by his father at the White House. No cameras. No locks. Just a heavy door left barely ajar. A whisper of invitation, or temptation. Isaiah Carter didn't believe in trust. Not anymore. Not since his own brother emptied their shared account and vanished. Not since the woman he once loved signed away his company behind his back. And not since his daughter, the only one he'd ever raised to love books and truth, sued him over inheritance she couldn't wait to receive. That's why the safe was open. That's why the test was live. And that's why he was watching. Not from across the room. Not from a hidden hallway. From a bunker 2 floors below, behind an armored steel door, in a control room built for presidents, not retirees. Every square inch of his 18,000 square foot lakefront estate was under surveillance. Except that room. Because Isaiah Carter didn't need a camera this time. He needed honesty that couldn't be coached. At exactly 8:02 a.m. she walked through the front door. Emily Grace. 24. Blonde hair like first snow, skin like porcelain, and eyes the color of untouched lake water. She didn't smile when she arrived. Didn't fidget. Didn't speak unless spoken to. He'd watched her through files, background checks, references. No arrests. No debt. No red flags. But none of that mattered if she failed what came next. The help always touched the money. Eventually. They peeked in, wandered too close, convinced themselves no one would notice one missing stack, one silent grab. Some took more. Some didn't get the chance. But today was different. Today, Isaiah Carter, billionaire, recluse, survivor of betrayal, was about to learn whether decency still existed in a world he no longer recognized. And the answer was about to walk straight into temptation. Trust wasn't just expensive. For Isaiah Carter, it was catastrophic. He learned that lesson young, too young. At 13, he watched his father get arrested in front of their Detroit duplex. The charge? Fraud. Not his fault. But it didn't matter. The system didn't wait for explanations when your skin was dark and your bank account empty. Isaiah grew up fast. No safety nets. No handouts. Just an old workbench in his uncle's garage and a gift for machines. By 18 he was rebuilding engines for street racers. By 24 he had patented a battery design that caught the eye of a private investor. That was the moment everything changed. And that was when the betrayals began. First it was his childhood best friend, Marcus, his co-founder, his brother, who siphoned off investment money and skipped town. Isaiah was left to clean up the mess. He didn't tell the press. Didn't call the police. He paid the debts in silence and rebuilt alone. Then came Tanya. Beautiful. Brilliant. A lawyer with charm and ambition. He married her after just 6 months. By their 3rd anniversary, she had gained partial ownership of his company and filed for divorce the same week she flew to Dubai with a competitor. Isaiah never saw her again. But her name stayed on the paperwork long enough to haunt 3/4 of his net worth. And then, there was Lila. His daughter. His heart. The only person who could bring him to his knees with just one word, Dad. She didn't steal from him. Not money. Not assets. She did worse. She filed a motion declaring him mentally unfit to manage his estate. Called it a protective measure. Hired lawyers. Took it to court. Said he was paranoid. Said he was unstable. She lost. But the damage? That never left. Isaiah sold the house in Los Angeles, cut ties with every major board he sat on, and moved to Lake Tahoe. He built a new home from scratch. All stone and glass. Security woven into the walls, the floors, the air ducts. No one came unless called. No one stayed unless paid. He stopped hosting dinners. Stopped trusting smiles. Stopped saying, I love you. Because in his world, love had terms. Trust had loopholes. And loyalty was just leverage in disguise. So now, at 52, with a fortune that could feed 5 cities and a heart that hadn't felt warmth since the Obama administration, Isaiah Carter watched strangers the way other people watched the stock market. Carefully. Suspiciously. Expecting disaster. And for good reason. Because in his experience, people didn't show you who they were until they thought no one was watching. She didn't look like temptation. She looked like someone who should have been on a greeting card. Fresh-faced, calm, not fragile, just quiet. Like a person who understood silence and didn't try to fill it. Emily Grace arrived on a Tuesday morning, 15 minutes early, in a light beige coat and worn leather flats. No designer purse. No dramatic makeup. Her blonde hair, tinged with platinum at the ends, was pulled back into a simple bun. A canvas tote bag hung over her shoulder like it belonged there. Isaiah stood behind the tinted glass window of his study, watching her through the lens of experience. He wasn't impressed easily. But she didn't fidget. Didn't pace. She stood on the stone porch, hands folded in front of her, eyes steady on the door as if waiting wasn't an inconvenience, it was part of the job. The agency had sent 3 candidates. One never replied. One asked if she could post interior photos of the house on her design account. Emily? Her file was clean. No criminal record. No social media presence. No complaints from former employers. Just one handwritten note attached by the placement agent. Works hard. Stays quiet. Motivated by purpose, not profit. Isaiah had laughed when he read that. Purpose. Everyone had one, until money walked into the room. Still, something about her stuck. When he opened the door, she smiled, not wide, not fake. Just enough to be respectful. Mr. Carter? She asked. Her voice was soft but not timid. He nodded and stepped aside. Come in. She walked like someone who'd cleaned homes before, avoiding rugs, glancing at corners, making mental notes without speaking them aloud. She carried no perfume. Wore no rings. Her hands were clean, her nails short, not polished. She didn't try to impress. And that's what made her stand out. Isaiah offered her tea. She declined politely. Asked if she had questions. She had one. Would you like the books in your library dusted as they are, or realigned by spine height as I clean? He blinked. That was it. That was the moment. No small talk. No compliments on the architecture or the view of the lake. No, I'm so honored to work here nonsense. Just precision. Detail. Awareness. She was either incredibly focused, or playing the long game. He couldn't tell which. But she didn't ask about the money. She didn't ask about him. And that was enough for now. He told her she could start tomorrow. The first thing Emily noticed wasn't the size of the house. It was the silence. Not the kind of silence you get in a quiet neighborhood or after a snowfall. This was different. This was the kind of silence that felt designed, engineered, like the air itself had been filtered through decades of grief and suspicion. The house was massive, 3 stories of glass, steel, and polished concrete. Tucked behind a private gate on the western edge of Lake Tahoe, it looked like something built more for observation than comfort. Every window faced the lake. Every hallway stretched too far. The rooms were pristine but hollow, like luxury showrooms no one dared to live in. Isaiah Carter's home didn't feel lived in. It felt guarded, like it was waiting for someone to test it. Emily's first day began at 8 a.m. sharp. Isaiah had left before sunrise. No note, no instructions, just a single text message to the agency. She starts today. She let herself in with the code he'd given her, and the door clicked shut behind her with a finality that sent a chill down her spine. She moved like someone trained to listen. No humming. No dragging her feet. Every step was measured. Purposeful. She started in the foyer, where a hand-sculpted marble table stood untouched beneath a chandelier worth more than her student loans. There was no dust, but she wiped anyway, tracing the edge with a soft cloth, watching her reflection bend in the glass like the house was studying her back. The kitchen was immaculate. Stainless steel counters, untouched gas ranges, a fridge full of perfectly aligned bottled water and nothing else. No snacks. No fruit. No sign that anyone had eaten here in weeks. Even the garbage bin was empty. She moved to the main living area. Large black couches sat stiff and angular like museum pieces. A fireplace without soot. Shelves lined with books that looked like they'd never been opened. Not a family photo in sight. Just clean lines. Cold surfaces. And silence that didn't echo. It lingered. Emily paused at the base of the staircase. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something older. Memory maybe. She glanced upward where a motion sensor flickered once. He was watching. Maybe not directly. But his presence was here, in every sensor, every lens, every carefully programmed light that turned on half a second before she reached it. The house didn't breathe. Because Isaiah Carter had designed it to do one thing. Watch without being seen. And Emily? She didn't flinch. He called it the vault. But it wasn't a safe room, not in the traditional sense. No keypad. No biometric scanner. No keypad countdown to make your heart race. Just a solid oak door with reinforced steel buried inside the frame, disguised as a reading room at the end of a rarely used hallway. The kind of door most people would overlook. That was the point. Isaiah Carter believed in control, in precision, in knowing the outcome before the question was ever asked. So he made sure everything was in place. The night before Emily's second shift, he entered the vault and prepared the stage. Over $4 million in cold, hard cash, arranged deliberately, visibly, as if carelessly forgotten. 4 leather-bound satchels rested on the brushed steel table, each one unzipped, revealing stacks of $100 bills, clean and crisp, still wrapped in Federal Reserve bands. Beside them, a velvet tray cradled 3 watches, a Patek Philippe, a Vacheron Constantin, and a limited edition Audemars Piguet, all together worth more than most homes in Nevada. On the shelf above, his late mother's wedding ring gleamed under a recessed light, positioned just so, like a siren song for anyone with even a whisper of greed in their heart. And on the edge of the table, like an afterthought, lay a folded note. Reminder: call the bank before 3 p.m. about the asset transfer. No envelope. No signature. Just enough to suggest haste. Then he disabled the internal alarm for that room, left the door slightly ajar and walked out. No camera. No tracking app. Just silence and a hallway that looked like every other. But he knew exactly what would happen. Because it always did. People were curious. They peeked. They wandered. They told themselves they'd just take a look. That no one would notice. But Isaiah noticed. Every time. He had spent a lifetime watching people reveal themselves when they thought no one was watching. It was never about what they said in interviews or what their resumes claimed. It was what they did in that hallway when the opportunity was too obvious to ignore. So when Emily Grace arrived that morning, Isaiah didn't greet her. He didn't need to. The trap was set. And if she was like everyone else, she'd step right into it. Not because she was evil. Not because she was desperate. Because she was human. And humans always looked. He sat in his study, a floor above, pretending to read, pretending not to care. But every fiber in his body was waiting. Because this time, he wanted to be wrong. She noticed it before she reached the hallway. There was something different about the air. A shift, subtle but real, like a faint current pushing against her steps. Emily paused at the corner, her cleaning caddy balanced in one hand, a folded rag in the other. The hallway, long and shadowed, seemed unchanged. But at the far end, that door. It wasn't closed. She'd walked past it yesterday. It had been sealed tight, the kind of door you only open with permission. Now it stood half open. Just enough to tempt. Just enough to test. She didn't move. Not right away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, listening, not for footsteps or voices but for instinct. That whisper in your chest that tells you when something isn't right. Then, slowly, deliberately, she approached. Isaiah watched from his study above, hands gripping the arms of his chair, jaw tight. The hallway monitor showed her figure, small but steady, eyes fixed ahead. She reached the door. Paused. And then, she knocked. 3 soft taps. Polite. Almost absurd, considering the circumstances. But she waited. Genuinely. No peeking. No leaning in. Just stillness. No one answered, of course. She didn't enter. Instead, Emily stepped back. Reached into her canvas tote. Pulled out her phone. Dialed a number. Isaiah leaned forward, squinting at the monitor. The call was short. Come. Professional. Hi, Ms. Adler? This is Emily Grace. I'm working at Mr. Carter's residence this week. I found a door open, far end of the hall. I think it leads to some kind of vault or private storage room. It's not locked. I didn't go in. Just wanted to report it in case it's a mistake. She listened, nodded once and ended the call. Then something happened Isaiah hadn't anticipated. Emily disappeared from view. For a second he panicked. Had she gone inside after all? But no. 2 minutes later, she returned, carrying a wooden chair from the breakfast nook. She placed it across from the door. Sat down. Straight-backed. Hands folded in her lap. Not staring. Not anxious. Just present. Like a guard. Like someone watching over something that didn't belong to her, but mattered anyway. She didn't fidget. Didn't pull out her phone. For 30 minutes she didn't move at all. When she finally did, it wasn't to leave. It was to pull out a paperback novel from her bag, flip to a marked page and begin reading, eyes flicking up every time the wind brushed against the house. Isaiah sat in stunned silence. No one had ever done this. Not once. They always opened the door. But Emily? She built a wall of integrity and sat in front of it. And for the first time in years, Isaiah Carter didn't feel like he was watching a stranger. He felt like he was watching a mirror of the person he used to be. It was close to 2 p.m. when her phone buzzed. A soft vibration, barely audible, but it made her shift in the chair like she'd just woken from a trance. Emily glanced at the door one last time before stepping a few feet away to answer. She lowered her voice, but the hallway microphone, hidden in a ceiling sconce, picked up just enough for Isaiah to hear. "Hi, Nana." Pause. "No, I'm still at work. Everything's okay." Another pause. This one longer. Then her voice changed. Softened. Crack. "What? When?" Her back stiffened. She turned her face toward the wall as if trying to block out the echo of her own thoughts. "They said how much?" Her hand trembled slightly. She switched the phone to her other ear. 85,000, she whispered. There was silence. The kind that carries weight. The kind that says everything words can't. I don't know, Nana. I'll figure something out." She ended the call with a quiet, "I love you," then stood there for a long moment, her face hidden from the camera, her shoulders rising and falling like each breath was harder than the last. Then she did something Isaiah didn't expect. She walked into the nearby sunroom, not toward the vault, not toward the front door, but to a small writing desk in the corner. She pulled out a sheet of lined paper, the kind schools give students on a budget, and uncapped a pen. Her handwriting was neat, slanted slightly, confident even now. "Mr. Carter, thank you for the opportunity. I regret that I can't continue this position. Something has come up. Please consider this my resignation, effective immediately. I've done my best to respect your space. Sincerely, Emily Grace." She folded the paper once, placed it gently on the entry table near the front door, and returned to the chair by the vault. And then, she cried. Not the kind of crying that demands attention. Not sobs. Not hysteria. Just silent tears. Steady. Unapologetic. Her hands gripped the edges of her pants like she was trying to hold herself together. Her breathing shallow. Controlled. Isaiah couldn't look away. He'd seen desperation before. Seen lies. Manipulation. People playing the long game. But this was none of that. This was a young woman who needed help and still chose to guard something that wasn't hers. No cameras. No one watching, she thought. No guarantee of reward. Just decency. Raw. Quiet. Unshakable. And for the first time in a long time, Isaiah Carter didn't feel suspicion rise in his chest. He felt shame. He watched every second. Every tear that slid down her cheek. Every time she looked at that door and chose not to move. Every breath she took that seemed to ask, "What now?" Isaiah Carter sat in the dim glow of his study, surrounded by walls that had once made him feel powerful, protected. Now they felt small, stale. Too quiet for a house that had just shown him something he couldn't ignore. Emily Grace had passed the test, but not in the way he expected. Most people failed quickly. They peeked inside within minutes. Some lingered before crossing the line. One even returned later at night, assuming the system shut down after dark. But none of them ever sat in front of the door for hours. None of them ever called his assistant to report a breach. And certainly, none of them cried over someone else's money without touching a single dime. Isaiah leaned back in his leather chair, stared at the ceiling, and let out a breath that felt decades old. What am I doing? The question hit him harder than he liked to admit. All these years building walls, installing locks, upgrading motion sensors, he thought it made him smarter, safer. But now, for the first time in years, he saw it clearly. What he built wasn't safety. It was distance. From people. From vulnerability. From the very humanity he used to believe in. He remembered the early days back before the money, when he'd shared meals with strangers, fixed cars for free, and opened his door without a second thought. Somewhere along the way, life taught him that kindness had a price tag. That trust came with betrayal. That anyone could smile at you with one hand while reaching into your pocket with the other. So he stopped giving people the chance. Until her. Emily. A girl who just lost everything and still chose to do the right thing when no one was watching. He stood slowly, his knees protesting like old wood bending in a storm. He crossed the room and opened the drawer of his desk, the same one where he kept rejection letters from people he once loved, the court filings from his daughter, and the private investigator reports on every single employee he'd ever hired. He pulled out a manila envelope, thick with cash, sealed the day before. The test reward. It suddenly felt insufficient. He looked toward the hallway, the cameras, the monitors, then turned them all off. He didn't need to watch her anymore. He had seen enough. More than enough. He saw what real character looked like. And for the first time in years, Isaiah Carter felt something he thought he'd buried long ago. Hope. She didn't expect him to be home. Emily had left the resignation note neatly folded near the entryway table and returned to her post outside the vault. She didn't know why she stayed. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was principle. Maybe it was because doing the right thing was the only thing she had left. So when she heard the sound of footsteps, deliberate, heavy, approaching from the marble hallway behind her, she stood quickly, wiped her face, smoothed her shirt like it could erase the exhaustion from her shoulders. Isaiah Carter appeared from around the corner. No camera lens. No intercom voice. Just him. In person. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, taking her in, her puffy eyes, the way she tried not to look embarrassed, how she squared her shoulders like someone ready to face consequences she didn't deserve. "I hope you don't mind," she said quietly. "I saw the door open earlier. I didn't go in. I just thought it should be watched." Isaiah didn't respond. Instead, he looked at the chair she had dragged from the kitchen, then back at her. "You've been sitting here all day?" She nodded. He walked past her into the vault. Not to check the money. Not to scan the watches or count the stacks. He already knew everything was there. He picked up the folded note, the same one he had planted the night before, and held it for a moment before tossing it gently back on the table. "I saw," he said. Emily blinked. "You saw?" "There are cameras," he admitted. "Not in here. But everywhere else." She didn't look offended. She didn't even look surprised. "It's your house," she said. "You have the right." Isaiah stepped closer, the air between them charged with something neither of them could name. Respect, maybe? Or recognition. "Why didn't you take anything?" he asked, voice low. She paused. Then answered without flinching. "Because it wasn't mine. You needed the money." She looked away. "That doesn't make it mine." Isaiah studied her. "Most people would have justified it." "I'm not most people," she said softly but firmly. He nodded. Then reached into his coat and pulled out the envelope, the one she didn't know he'd prepared. He held it out. "You passed the test." Emily didn't take it. "I didn't do it for a reward." "I know," he said. "That's why you earned it." Still she hesitated. "I'm not trying to buy you," he added. "I'm trying to thank you." This time her eyes did well up. But she didn't cry. She simply took the envelope, held it close to her chest and whispered, "Then thank you." And for the first time since the test began, neither of them felt like strangers anymore. Emily didn't notice the change in his expression, at least not right away. Isaiah stood there, envelope still half raised, eyes narrowed just slightly, like he was trying to place something that had been lost in memory. "What did you say your name was again?" he asked. "Emily," she said, a bit confused. "Emily Grace." His mouth moved silently, repeating it to himself. Not the first name. The last. Grace. He stepped back, motioned toward the study. "Come with me." She followed him, unsure if she'd done something wrong or if this was just another layer in the maze of his guarded world. The study was darker than the hallway, warmer too. Books lined the walls, and the scent of old wood and ink hung in the air. He crossed to a drawer, pulled it open, and took out a slim manila folder. Inside, a newspaper clipping. Yellowed at the edges, folded 3 times. He placed it on the desk between them. The headline was from 3 years ago. "Good Samaritan saves child in highway crash. Vanishes before police arrive." Emily froze. "I know this," she whispered. Isaiah nodded. "That child was my niece." Her mouth opened slightly. "She was 6, he continued. Car flipped 3 times on I-80. The first responder on the scene said a girl in a blue hoodie climbed through the broken glass, pulled my niece out, wrapped her in her own coat, then disappeared before the medics arrived." Emily blinked. "That wasn't... I didn't think anyone noticed." He turned the paper over. A faded surveillance still, grainy and low-res, showed the silhouette of a young woman walking away from flashing lights. "It was you," he said. "I recognized the hair. The way you moved." Emily's hands trembled. "I didn't do it for attention." "I know. I just couldn't leave her there." Isaiah sat down slowly. "I spent months trying to find you. Hired a private investigator. All I had was a blurry image and the initials EG written by the nurse. I gave up." Emily lowered her gaze. "I didn't want anything. I didn't want recognition. I just wanted her to be okay." Isaiah nodded quietly. "She is." They sat in silence for a moment. A thick, weighty stillness, but not the cold kind. It was the kind of silence that meant something. "You didn't just save her," he said, voice low. "You reminded me who I used to be." She looked up, eyes wide. "I thought I was testing you," he said. "But you saved me first." The next morning, Emily returned to the house just after sunrise. She hadn't planned to. She assumed her time there was done, that she'd collected her things, left her letter, and received more closure than most people ever got in a lifetime. But Isaiah had texted her at 5:47 a.m. "Come back, please. No cleaning today. Just talk." And so she did. He greeted her at the door himself this time. No voice through the intercom, no delay, no coldness. "Coffee?" he asked. She nodded. He handed her a mug, black, no sugar, somehow knowing exactly how she took it. They sat in the study, the same room where he'd once watched people on screens like a warden in a fortress. Now the monitors were off. The chair was turned toward her. The safe in the wall was unlocked, slightly ajar as if to say, "I'm done hiding." Isaiah opened a folder on the desk. Inside, documents, contracts, notarized signatures. Her name. At the top, the Carter Foundation. "I started this years ago," he said, quietly. "It funds scholarships, medical relief, food programs. But it's never been led by someone who actually knows what it's like to need help." He pushed the folder across to her. "I want you to run it." Emily stared at him. At the embossed lettering. At her name typed next to Executive Director. "What?" she said almost under her breath. "You earned it," he replied. "No, I didn't," she said, shaking her head. "I cleaned your floors. I sat in a chair. You didn't take what wasn't yours. You stood guard when no one asked. You saved my niece when no one else would. That's leadership, Emily." She was silent, eyes flicking across the legal terms, the titles, the power. "I'm not qualified," she whispered. Isaiah leaned in. "That's what makes you qualified. You've lived it. You've stretched every dollar. You've stayed up at night wondering how to make rent and still sent money to your grandmother. You know what help should feel like. That's something no MBA teaches." Her throat tightened. "This is your legacy." He nodded. "And I want it to mean something when I'm gone. Not just numbers. Not just tax write-offs. Something that breathes. Something that heals." Emily blinked back tears. "I don't even know where to start." "I'll show you," he said. "I'll teach you everything I know." She looked down at the folder one last time, then nodded. Not out of obligation. Not because of the money. Because someone had finally said, "I trust you." And for the first time she believed it. Weeks passed. Then months. But something in that house, something in both of them, had changed forever. The vault door was no longer a test. It was just a door. And most days now it stayed wide open. Not because the money inside meant less, but because the fear around it had finally lost its grip. Isaiah no longer watched the house through security feeds. He listened to the sound of voices. He learned to make space for footsteps that weren't his own. And Emily? She didn't clean much anymore. She led. She held meetings in the study. Answered calls from local nonprofits, young activists, struggling families. She walked into rooms she once tiptoed through. She spoke with confidence and made decisions with heart. And the foundation, once a quiet arm of a man who didn't trust the world, became a living, breathing force. Not because of the money. Because of her. One evening, long after sunset, they sat outside on the stone patio behind the house. A warm breeze drifted across Lake Tahoe, carrying the scent of pine and something sweeter. Hope, maybe. Emily looked out over the water and said, "You know, I used to think character was about what you did when everyone was watching." Isaiah smiled. "And now? Now I think it's about what you protect, when no one tells you to." He nodded slowly, the corners of his eyes softening. "You could have walked away," he said. "Taken the money. Said nothing." "But I didn't," she said. "No," he said, "you didn't. You stayed." They sat in silence for a long time. Then Isaiah leaned back and said, "What's locked isn't always what matters. Sometimes the real treasure isn't in the vault. It's in the hands that choose not to open it." Emily looked down at her hands. They were the same ones that had once scrubbed baseboards, folded towels, and made grilled cheese for her grandmother with the last $5 in her wallet. Now they signed grant approvals, drafted strategy reports, changed lives. But they hadn't changed her. She was still that girl in the blue hoodie, crawling through broken glass to pull someone else to safety. Still the one who chose to guard, not take. Still the one who believed doing the right thing was enough, even when no one saw it. As the stars came out, Isaiah raised his glass. "To the ones who stay," he said. Emily lifted hers in return. "And to the doors we don't open because we know better."